Goeienaand, dis tyd vir Fokus. Baie welkom. Ek is Lenet Francis Peuren. Bietjie later in die program praat ons met 'n internetkenner oor WhatsApp se nuwe privaatheidsregulasies. Die parlementêre portefeuljekomitee oor maatskaplike ontwikkeling het vandag vergader na gewelddadige optrede teen mense wat vir ongeskiktheidstoelaas wil aansoek doen by talle SASSA-kantore landwyd. Meer as 200.000 mense het tou gestaan om aansoek te doen vir tydelike gestremdheidstoelaas. Die toelaas het aan die einde van Desember verval. Die optrede teen die aansoekers het gevolg omdat hulle glo saamgedrom en nie 'n veilige afstand tussen mekaar gehandhaaf het nie, soos vereis deur die inperking nie. Intussen kla talle kykers dat hulle nie by dokters kan uitkom om die nodige dokumentasie te kry wat hulle dan wel in staat sal om vir hierdie tydelike gestremdheidstoelaas te kan aansoek doen nie. FOKUS het ook die uitvoerende hoof van SASSA, Tsotsi Mamela, na die ateljee genooi, maar sy was weens ander verpligtinge nie beskikbaar nie. Die Weskaapse minister van maatskaplike ontwikkeling, Shana Fernandes, is wel beskikbaar en ons gesels nou met haar via Zoom. Die meeste van die aansoekers is van die Weskaap. And thank you so much for joining us this evening, Minister Fernandes. I appreciate your time. I quickly just want to start off with some of the views of our viewers who's raised their concerns about the fact that they don't have access and many grants who have lapsed. And I quote, and I trust that you can follow me in Afrikaans. Ons wil net hoor of julle dalk kan inkyk op die SASSA disability mense het nog nie hulle gelde gekry nie en daar is nêrens waar hulle dit kan aangee nie. Die nommer wat daar is word nie beantwoord nie. Asseblief die mense maak staat en lewe op daai geld. Dis die een deel daarvan. Dan is daar 'n tweede een wat sê, en ek haal vir jou aan, FOKUS span, ek dink julle moet weer die SASSA vrou, die CEO Tsotsi Mamela op julle program bring. Miljoene tydelike gestremdes se toelaas is gestop en dokters is nie beskikbaar nie of nie genoeg om die pasiënte te evalueer nie. Die mense gaan dood van die hongerte. And I know that this probably isn't foreign to you, but if you assess the work that the Department of Social Development has done since the outbreak of this pandemic, and in particular, the way your department has handled it thus far, what are you proud of and what are you very concerned and ashamed of?
Firstly, Lynette, let me greet you and say good evening to you and the viewers. The quotes that you talk to are in fact real. I am very concerned that the temporary disability grants were extended at the end of February to December. And this has given SASSA enough time to plan accordingly for the time when it lapsed, which was the 31st of December. But I'm embarrassed, and I think the waterbombing of disabled persons in that queue is despicable, and I condemn it in the strongest possible terms. I also want to say that I don't believe that SASSA has planned accordingly in terms of, firstly, their capacity is failing. Yes, there was a portfolio committee meeting this morning, but a lot of what was shared in the portfolio committee meeting are aspirational inputs. They are not real things that are actually taking place as we speak. So if I could just give you the backdrop. On the 4th of January, I walked with Minister Zulu at Masiphumeleli, which was the scene of a fire. I alerted her to the fact that we needed to have a discussion on SASSA. On the 3rd of January, we received a note to say that SASSA had planned accordingly and that everything would go smoothly. Sadly, the events that unfolded indicated that there was no planning or prior preparation. And the queues, I mean, there's a curfew. People were being criminalized for breaking the curfew to be in a queue. But the impact or the most important concern I have right now, Lynette, is that we are facing a humanitarian crisis. These are people who are temporarily disabled. They have not received any grant, as far as I know, for this month. They need to reapply. Now, let me give you an example of what is happening in the Western Cape. There are currently 9 doctors assigned by SASA to assess almost 52,000 grant recipients. Now, if you do the maths and you work the numbers, it's never going to happen. So what I did last Tuesday, I wrote an email. I sent a formal letter to Minister Zulu requesting that she convene a special MINMEC meeting for all MECs to be appraised. So what has happened, on the Wednesday, the coastal regions and the CEO of SASA met with me and the team of DSD in the Western Cape. They presented the 10-point plan, which I can describe as aspirational. There is nothing in that 10-point plan that has clear guidelines that tells you, it gives you timelines, it doesn't talk to the how, why, and when. I then asked them, would they go away, reconsider some of the inputs that we had given them? And the very first point I raised was that of communication. How did they communicate to beneficiaries who mostly do not have access to social media, like Facebook, Twitter, WhatsApp, or whatever it might be? We gave them certain recommendations. I also addressed the health concern because we've got input from some of our doctors who are indicating that these COVID queues have the capacity to become super spreader events, and we will see 10, 14 days down the line how that unpacks. But my most important concern is that person who slept in the queue the night before gets a card or a ticket telling him or her to come back on another day to get a form or to get a date to see a doctor. Now, people need to eat. And I'm very pleased this morning, I see that the Red Cross and some civil society NPOs have got involved, and they are currently feeding individuals. But it is the duty of SASA in terms of the Social Services Act, Chapter 2, to provide social relief of distress. So guess what? In our meeting, we are told that they no longer do food aid or food parcels, but that they will be providing vouchers to affected individuals. So my big question is, when will this person be told that they will get a voucher? In my conversation with the CEO, Totsi Manamela, she indicated that the voucher would be in the region of 700 Rand. When we had our follow-up meeting, was it yesterday or the day before, we heard that there would be an SRD of 500 Rand that would be granted to these beneficiaries. But listen, they now need to apply and do a completely new application to apply for social relief of distress, to be able to get a voucher to purchase electricity, food, or whatever it is they might be.
Minister, I have to interrupt you. I have to go to a break, but when I come back, I do want you to please assess what you have done in your department in the interim and how you rate your performance. I understand and I appreciate you giving me the background to what the discussions were, but there are people sitting hungry as we speak. I want to hear, if we talk to those 53,000 people in the Western Cape still waiting for their grants, what your response to that is after the break. Net hierna sit ons die gesprek voort, bly ingeskakel. Die fokus is vanaand op SASSA toelaas en die probleme wat aansoekers ondervind. Ons praat via Zoom met die Weskaapse minister van Maatskaplike Ontwikkeling, Shana Fernandez. And I've asked you to just recap for me what you have been able to do and to particularly address the current situation. If we talk about 52,000 people in the Western Cape still waiting, and there aren't enough doctors, and there's seemingly not going to be enough vouchers.
So, Lynette, the first thing we did was engage with the City of Cape Town. I spoke with the mayor and the mayoral committee member because SASSA had requested that I assist them in securing additional venues like community centers or civic halls we have managed to get some additional halls open to alleviate the pressure on the queue. We were also alerted, and we were not made aware of this, but National DSD had given us an allocation of 51 million for food relief, but it was not told that it was conditional for the temporary disability grant recipients. So I was quite shocked in our meeting earlier this week to hear that that money needs to be used to feed the most vulnerable. We have councillors working on the ground. I work very closely with the City of Cape Town, and our councillors are assisting SASSA at pay points to ensure that they get as many people registered. I must also tell you, though, what SASSA has done, they have contacted as many GPs in the province as they could. They have found 500 who have indicated that they are willing to assist. So we believe that there should be at least 17 doctors in the system. So the problem is not the problem is actually the assessments, but the funding for the assessment is the challenge, because even with the 51 million which we have received, we will not be able to reach all of those temporary grant recipients. But I just want to highlight you to the current pressure, which I think all our viewers need to be aware of, is that to extend the temporary disability grant to March will cost 1.2 billion rand. And SASSA says that currently they only have 411 million rand available. But Lynette, I am appealing to the National Minister, to the President, because we need, if we can find money for SAA, 10.5 billion for chicken and beef in the sky, but we cannot reprioritize funding as a matter of urgency to prevent a humanitarian crisis, then we have failed the most vulnerable. So our best efforts together with NPOs, and I have signed off a submission for feeding, but we would need SASSA to cooperate and provide us with granular detail, because at this point we only have detail per region as if it were. So but we are willing to work with them, but funding is the issue, and we need an extension. The entire country needs an extension. Lynette, a 55-year-old woman, passed away in the queue at Roy Duckies. When they were water bombing the beneficiaries at Baalbel, a woman got an epileptic fit. She has a brain tumor, yet they announced only people in wheelchairs must be in the queue. Now, surely this system needs to be revisited, because SASSA currently does not have the technical capacity to manage the sheer volumes that they face. And I speak not only for the Western Cape, but for every single province where this is happening.
Thank you so much for your time. I'm really saddened that we don't have enough time to just focus on some of these issues that we haven't even addressed in the available time that you've given us this evening. En dis wat my bekommer, minister, is dat mense besig is om te sterf terwyl ek en jy praat oor begrotings en wat gedoen moet word. Baie dankie vir jou tyd vanaand hier op Fokus. Bly ingeskakel, net hierna verskuif ons die fokus na WhatsApp en sy nuwe bevraagdheidsbeleid. Ons is nou terug. Welkom terug by Fokus. Die boodskapplatform WhatsApp het onlangs bekend gemaak dat sy gebruikers die platform se nuwe privaatheidsbeleid sal moet aanvaar, anders gaan hulle nie voortaan meer van WhatsApp gebruik kan maak nie. Maar wat behels die nuwe beleid en hoe raak dit dan gebruikers? Jolien Reed het by 'n kenner om hulp gaan aanklop en die verslag vir ons saamgestel.
Die vraag op die volk se tong is: gaan jy WhatsApp van jou foon afhaal? Just give us a brief breakdown on why and what these new policies actually mean.
The first thing to understand is that the information that WhatsApp is collecting from you doesn't really change much. What changes is the fact that that information can now be pulled into Facebook's profile of you. So Facebook is going to combine the information it collects from its own platform and from WhatsApp to be able to create a better profile for businesses to be able to target you with advertising. So if you look at the terms and conditions, you can see that they collect a massive amount of information, even down to what your battery level is. And people say, what's the significance of that? Well, in terms of profiling people, if they're able to pick up that you continually let your battery run down, that tells them something about your habits as a smartphone user. Perhaps that you're lazy, or that you need reminders, or something to that effect, or that you're often caught short. So that already gives them a basis on which to start targeting you. But it obviously goes a lot further than that. They are now able to combine your phone number with who your contacts are and combine that with who your contacts are on Facebook and get a sense of your peer group's behavior versus your behavior. So it can become very invidious. In other words, it can become quite invasive of your privacy.
And what can consumers expect that decide to stay on the WhatsApp platform?
Most consumers won't experience a real difference, except that they are going to find advertising that they see on Facebook becoming uncannily personalized. Not that it's necessarily better advertising or that it's offering you what you really need, but for example, people already complain that they'll be talking about a product and then suddenly they see an advert for it. Well, that experience is going to become a very common experience. And it's going to feel creepy and invasive because it is creepy and invasive.
WhatsApp has now, in the past few days, has really tried to go onto a campaign in order to explain better, to explain the point that they're trying to get across. But at the end of the day, it's still information that's being sent or being shared with another platform.
One can't explain it away. The big mistake they made, though, was the way they announced it, because they put it across as an ultimatum. You have to do this or else. And the message that they were sent out is that they're forcing people to do something. Whereas when you think about almost any app that you use, any social platform, any service that you use online, you have to accept terms and conditions. It's not that anyone is forcing you or that you have an ultimatum. If you don't accept terms and conditions, you don't get to carry on using the product or service. Even when you visit websites, in many cases, you have to click a button that says you accept cookies or the terms and conditions of usage of the site. And it's your choice. Do you want to go ahead with that? Well, half the time when I see one of those, I say, no, and I just close the browser. But when it comes to services like WhatsApp and Facebook, we've become so dependent on them that generally speaking, we do accept updated terms and conditions. But the way they put it across was as if this is a major watershed in your use of messaging and social media.
I think some people also feel that it's very intrusive.
It's deeply intrusive when you consider the extent of information they collect, not just about you, but about who you communicate with and how you communicate with them. And those people, in turn, also have been profiled by Facebook. And you start putting together the combinations of profiles, the combinations of contacts, and you start getting a deep insight into someone's social life, for example. That is very intrusive.
I also want to know, like these policies, who is it targeted at? Is it target orientated? Is it for the who's expected to benefit from this?
The whole intention of these policies is to be able to deliver to advertisers a fine-tuned profile, or rather a fine-tuned targeting of people according to their profiles. So it's very much targeted at the advertising world or at the business world that advertises on Facebook. So already when you advertise on Facebook, you're able to target quite closely who you want to reach. It's not as effective as they make it out to be. If anyone who has used Facebook advertising will know that, for example, if the requirement is to have click-throughs, a large proportion of those click-throughs are irrelevant to the brand. So I think part of the intention is to also give the impression to advertisers that targeting is going to be far more accurate from now on.
Die keuse bly steeds joune.
Ek weet mense soos baie bitter bekommerd oor hierdie WhatsApp, Telegram, Facebook ding, want hulle gaan jou trek en hulle gaan sien wat jy doen. En dalk is ek regtig net blond en stupid. Maar wat gaan hulle sien? Dat ek net R33 elke maand oor het in my bank?
Dis 'n groot vraag, nee. Baie dankie vir die saamkyk vanaand. Ongelukkig is dit waar ons moet afsluit. Onthou Fokus word elke donderdagoggend om 10:30 op SABC2 herhaal. En ons is ook steeds beskikbaar op YouTube. Indien jy met ons kontak wil maak, besoek ons Facebookblad of jy kan vir ons e-pos stuur. Ons lees graag jou kommentaar, jou tweets en jou voorstelle. Jy stuur dit aan fokus@sabc.co.za. Bly op hoogte van al ons stories op ons Fokusblad op Facebook by Fokus SABC en dan volg jy ons ook op Twitter by FokusZA. Baie dankie vir die saamkyk, die terugvoer en die vertroue en dat jy in kontak met ons bly. Totsiens, tot volgende week.